It's 1942, and once again, the world is at war. And Canada, like many other countries at the time, had a big part to play in the global conflict. Men in their early to mid-20s were all subject to being called up to the army to join the war effort, and professional athletes were no exception. At the same time, the Bruins were coming toward the end of their season. The year before, they had captured their third Stanley Cup, after sweeping the Detroit Red Wings in 4 games. Much of the success of the previous season is owed to 3 men: Milt Schmidt, Woody Dumart, and Bobby Bauer. Now, I know NBC likes to dub Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak as the perfection line, but the combination of Schmidt, Dumart, and Bauer was the actual perfection line. The 3 of them were so dominant that in the 1939-1940 season, they managed to finish first, second, and third in scoring in the entire NHL. All 3 players were of German descent and grew up in Kitchener, Ontario. While playing for Boston's farm team in 1936, they received the nickname the Sauerkraut Line, which would later be shortened to the Kraut Line. Kitchener was primarily a German community. In fact, it was previously called Berlin until 1916. As German aggression began to increase in Europe, so did anti-German sentiment in Canada and America, and the line's name would eventually be redubbed the Kitchener Kids. The 3 men seemed to have more than just a hockey connection. They were essentially brothers. And with the threat of war looming, they felt it was their duty to enlist in the Canadian Air Force to defend the country if needed. In December of 1941, just 8 months after winning their Stanley Cup, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and America and its allies joined the war. By the early part of 1942, the 3 men prepared to be shipped overseas. But first, one last game needed to be played. On February 10, 1942, the Boston Bruins faced off against the Montreal Canadiens at Boston Garden. It would be the last game before the Kraut Line went off to war. On an emotionally charged night, the Bruins knew they had to win this game. By the end of the first period, they found themselves with a 2-1 lead. By the end of the second, a 4-1 lead. And by the time the game came to a close, the Bruins had scored another 4 goals, bringing the final score to 8-1. And of course, the Kraut Line was all over the stat sheet. Dumart scored the Bruins' 3rd goal. Schmidt would get the assists on the 4th goal. And then, in the 3rd period, Bauer managed to pot 2 goals of his own. And at the end of the game, the 3 men were sent out to center ice where Bruins management presented them with full season paychecks and bonuses. General manager Art Ross, along with his sons, presented them with watches as gifts, and then called the 3 men the most loyal and courageous players in Bruins history. Bauer said over the loudspeaker, "I've never been more speechless in my whole life. You will all be proud of us." The Montreal Canadiens then put their bitter rivalry aside and helped carry the 3 men off the ice. It was a special moment that Milt Schmidt never forgot. He later said, "It just goes to show that you can have pretty bitter enemies out on that ice. But after the game is over, we are all friends. And I think that has a lot to say about the people who play the game." The 3 men ended up playing for the Royal Canadian Air Force hockey team. Schmidt and Dumart would actually end up playing against each other in England. All 3 of them wouldn't return to Boston until 1946, and by 1954, they would all retire. Milt Schmidt continued to make history with Boston even after his playing days were over. He helped sign Bobby Orr to a contract in Boston in 1962. As GM of the Bruins, he helped craft a team that would win 2 Stanley Cups in 1970 and 1972. So out of the 6 championships the Bruins have won, Schmidt played an important role in 4 of them. There are a lot of special moments captured on film in Bruins history, but the image of the Kraut Line being carried off by their bitter rivals will live on as one of the most special moments in franchise history.